everybody, and welcome to Real Hawk Talk. I am Brian Nemhauser. You have made it to episode 209, and we are so happy to have you. It's going to be a fun night. There is so much Seahawks news to discuss, and Dayna O'Gorman. It's going to be a fun night. There is so much. Whoa, I'm getting feedback. Hold on one second, guys. And Dayna O'Gorman. I don't think anyone wants to hear me twice. I'm sure I don't want to hear me twice. One second, guys. See, you gotta mute YouTube. I try to be available in the chat, and nobody wants to hear me twice, or three times, depending. But welcome again. Let's try that again. Welcome to episode 209. Tons of Seahawks news to talk about. I thought Jeff was jumping in to interrupt about the Seahawks news, and I was excited to hear what he had to say. But yes, we've got Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons. How are you, dude?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I like this time of year. You got the end of the baseball season. Football's heating up. It's a fun time of the year right now.
Preseason. Careful. You bring up baseball. Your Blue Jays, they're hanging on by a thread.
I'm so mad at them.
They somehow managed to work with the gods today to get a rain delay because they were going to fall out of first place of the wild card because the Mariners are on their tail, dude.
Man, you guys have some fun games going on with the Yankees, but I thought our boys, we cheaped out so much of the deadline, and I don't know what they were doing, and I was pissed off, and now they're leaking oil. So I hate to be proven right, but Jay's Twitter is like a bunch of fanboys, so I get a little annoyed with them. And so,
wow.
That's another story. We'll save that for another day.
We will. We're certainly pretty excited over here. Dayna O'Gorman at Dayna OG on Twitter is actually coming to visit Seattle. You got some family that might be moving here, checking out where to live. And I feel like you're going to have to, if the Mariners are playing a game, I think you might need to go see one. It's rocking right now. It's fun.
Okay. I'll go if you want me to. Listen,
is that you're not a baseball fan thing, or
not
is that
a huge baseball person? No, it's not a Mariners thing. I really watched baseball for 2 seasons when the Royals went to back-to-back World Series, but I'm just not a huge baseball person. I like to go to games, though. I think they're a lot of fun, and I like to watch, but it's not something I pay much attention to. Remember, it's football and soccer for me. So
yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, a lot of people go to.
I'm not going to a Sounders game, though.
I figured. We won't talk about the Sounders. I know that's a very sensitive. But yeah, we're really excited to have you, and we're trying to arrange our Ring of Honor dinner for when you're here. We were hoping we could get Evan and Jeff here as well. That's not going to work out this time, but maybe another time. So if it doesn't work out, we'll do Ring of Honor another time. But hopefully we can get that all coordinated. So
here Evan's too busy kissing Mark Rogers and Russell Wilson's ass still.
Really, is that happening? Did I miss something?
I just feel like every time I log on Twitter, Evan's still coping with Russell, and I don't know. I'm just taking a fucking.
It's taking him a minute.
Yeah.
I listed it. Nathan had a tweet, and I put up these 5 stages of breaking up with someone, and I said Seattle was in 2 to 3, where you're starting to talk all the shit about the person and you're kind of getting to hating them. And Evan's not there yet. He's just sad. He's just in the first stage still. It's going to take him a minute.
No, I mean, I really feel like I've moved to a new stage, thankfully, because of the news coming out of the Seahawks camp. There's some of the best career advice I ever got was never run from a job, always run to a job. And I think there's something to that for this as well. Just being trying to get away from the Russell stuff, and that's not fun. But there's news that's pretty exciting that is drawing my attention out of Seahawks camp. And it's not all great. We've got some injuries we'll talk about and stuff along those lines, but I got to start with the cornerback room. I'm really, really excited about everything I'm hearing, everything I'm seeing, and I can't wait to see these guys up against opponents Saturday. I mean, we've got a game Saturday night against the Steelers in Pittsburgh, and look, Tariq Woolen, let's start there. we all talked about him. We were excited about that draft pick. Super toolsy, cornerback, 6'4", 4'2", 40, like unreal measurables, like, crazy measurables. But he was thought to be a project, probably, like a guy that maybe you hope you develop this year and maybe starts to get snaps towards the end of the season or next year. There's like possibility he actually takes the starting role, which is like unreal. And I don't know, have you guys seen, Jeff, I'll start with you. Have you seen some of the clips of him going up against DK? There's a clip today that was also unreal. I don't know if you saw that one, where he like knocked one away in the end zone and then ended up being able to almost, I don't know if he actually kept his feet in bounds, but it looked like he picked it off. Like, crazy.
Yeah, man. Mike Duger's done a really good job, like putting out a lot of the Tariq quotes or the clips. He says like the team's calling him Spooky or something, or Avatar. I think that was you, Brian, that pointed that out too. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm really with you. He's a really fun guy, and he just, when they drafted him, he just seemed like a guy who had all the skill set, but just super raw. And the fact that he's able to adjust, and we'll really see in these preseason games and hopefully in the regular season. But yeah, it kind of just speaks to my feeling overall. And I know a lot of people probably think I'm nuts for feeling this way, but like, just compare a lot of these position groups to how we talked about the Seahawks, especially in our chat group. Like, remember what we were talking about at the cornerback last year in preseason? Like, they had guys coming in and out of their lineup, and they were trying new combinations, and it was a Kello Weatherspoon and Trey Flowers, and Pete was trying to pump up the Trey Flowers to turn in the corner for the fourth time. And you look at this position group now, and you got two rookies who are both all seemingly like lighting up camp. And that's where like I just feel so differently about how this team, and the cornerback's a perfect spot, because you talked about 2 years ago where Shaquille Griffin was on the last year of his deal and DJ Reed that wasn't on the team yet. And it was just such a bleak, and we spent the whole offseason just beating our heads against the wall. Like, what are these guys doing? And it just feels like throughout this roster, there's just players that have the potential to ascend to make the season so much different to me in terms of just like long-term sustainability than they've been the last 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, Dayna, I did just see the Avatar nickname right before we joined, and I'm assuming it's the long blue Avatar creatures and not the Airbender, although I'm a big fan of the Airbender. I mean, Airbender's super toolsy. He's not tall and lanky, but he's got a lot that's going on there. So either way, it's always a good sign when a guy that came out of really nowhere has already earned a nickname from teammates that does not seem like it's derisive. It seems like this guy's got their attention.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what has been fascinating about this group, and Tariq in particular, because he's gotten so much attention, is what it has done for my view of where this team is focused at. I completely, I love defense. I pound the table for defense all the time, but it feels like with as much attention as these young corners are getting, and as much attention as the young players on defense are getting, that you can feel the shift back with the way it was for so many years for Seattle. And then you add to that, you bring back in, which made my freaking week to see Richard Sherman on that field during the practice game. Like, I hate to be girly or emotional, but it literally made me tear up, because that was just something I was waiting to happen. And then to hear that he is not only talking to that cornerback group, but kind of, I hate to say the word mentor, because that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but he's talking to them. And then he picked out Tariq as someone he really wanted to talk to and focus to. That says a lot about this kid. He's not just some newbie on the corner. The interesting thing too, what is it Tariq that KJ said was really good and you got worried about?
Hey, yeah, I was going to bring that up. So KJ was on KJR, I believe, and apparently was talking up Tariq Woolen. And I immediately posted it to our chat, because that is like the kiss of death. I mean, this is the guy that went on whatever Seahawks Access show and was talking up Tedrick Thompson like he was going to be the next big thing. So KJ and his ability to project defensive backs has not been good so far, but hopefully it's not just him.
Yeah, I thought that was hilarious because you were like, no, it's like the one
Kiss
red
of
flag.
death. Kiss of
It's
death.
so funny. But we hear about him. We're hearing a lot about Kobe Bryant. Also, I know that am I right that Trey Brown will be back soon? They're expecting him soon.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
So
I don't know how soon with Trey Brown, and actually, that's a worthwhile thing for us to talk about. My guess is that Trey Brown's going to start on PUP. That's my guess. I think they're going to
for the season.
Yeah, I think not.
Okay.
He'll start there. It doesn't mean that he'll stay there. He'll be eligible to come back. What's the PUP rules now? Is it still 6 games, or can you come back sooner?
I think it's 6 games.
And I think
I thought they changed it, didn't they? I thought that they changed it.
It's the IR rules that changed.
The IR rules changed. I know that.
Okay. So sorry.
Yeah. So before we leave Tariq, I wanted to share something really quick, just as like I'm going to share my screen for a second. And are you guys able to see this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So this is Tariq Woolen's measurables, and this is like his percentile for all of these different factors relative to everybody that's gone through the combine. This is insane, right? Like, and it's fun to look at these things and think like, gosh, if that could ever work out. But they're like, it's like a lottery. Like the types of guys that go in the 4th or 5th round that have these kinds of physical traits, it's 1 in 100, 1 in 500, 1 in 1,000 that actually are able to capitalize on those traits. But you've got a guy that's over 6'4", over 200 pounds. I mean, this wingspan's nuts. 4.26 40 is nuts. 42-inch vertical is nuts. Like, the closest compare from a cornerback perspective is Xavier Rhodes, who's been a very good corner, but he's not even like a high percentage match. Like, if you just look at it like from an athlete perspective, like you just get some like Sidney Rice. Like, I don't know. It's just crazy to me. Look at that. Trey Flowers.
Oh boy.
But like, I think it's just huge. What I'm seeing from him in clips is a guy that can move his feet, that's able to be fluid, something that Trey Flowers never could. Like, Trey Flowers was converted from safety. The very first practice I saw him, I was like, this guy's hips are super like tight. Like, he's not fluid in and out of breaks. Like, he doesn't look like a corner. Woolen, in just a few clips, you can tell that guy can move naturally and he goes after the ball. And then before we even talk about Trey, like Kobe Bryant, like this guy also looks like, did you guys see the clip of him going up against DK? I think I sent it out yesterday. DK tried to take like a stutter step. And DK, gets on you pretty fast. The guy covers a lot of ground. He's a huge human being. Kobe Bryant was glue. He was moving in sync with DK. DK could not shake him. To credit DK, he actually made a contested catch, which was nice to see. But I thought it was pretty eye-popping, to be honest, seeing what Kobe was doing just in that clip and what we've heard. And now, Jeff, we're hearing about him second day in a row. He is taking snaps at nickel. And I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are about the implications of Kobe Bryant at nickel.
Yeah, it surprised me. He didn't seem to have that kind of profile of like the shorter, quick area guy. But I think it's just trying to find a way to get their best players on the field and see. I think the way Pete framed it was they're just trying to see if he's versatile enough to do it. Because if Woolen's playing like this, like he might be a starter sooner than we think. And I think they're just trying to see if they can get, if you're a team in transition and you can get all your younger guys on the field instead of a guy like Ugo, who I think we kind of know what Ugo is at this point. Justin Coleman's an older player. He's a good guy to have in a season like this where he's a stopgap, the scheme. So I think it's just seeing what he can do. I still think Kobe projects more as an outside corner. So I think he'll probably end up back there. But you can get 3 good young corners on the field, and Artie Burns and Sidney Jones were having good camps before they got hurt. To me, that's much more intriguing than playing a guy like Ugo or even Justin Coleman in a season like this.
Yeah, I mean, Dayna, I have to admit, like I thought when they signed Justin Coleman, I didn't think he was a lock to be the nickel, but I thought this guy's gonna have a really strong chance. And now I don't know, like it's starting to set up like this guy's the vet. Is this a repeat of the Antoine Winfield 2013 year, I think it was, where he came in, he was like, we were psyched to have him as our nickel corner, like super accomplished player. And there was just such an overwhelming, amount of cornerback talent that he got cut. He didn't make the team. It was
Yeah.
a shock. Do you think that could happen here with Coleman?
I think anything could happen at this point. I mean, we know what Justin Coleman can bring to the table, and that's Jeff and I talk about this a lot. That's the fun of this season, is we get to see the development of some of these players. And are they players that can jump some, and this is no disrespect to Justin Coleman, but some of these kind of more middle level players that we have had in, and he's a very good player, but he's not like he's an elite player at his position. And so can some of these younger, faster, quicker kids come in and pick up those positions and start to take over? There's been a lot of buzz about the youth of this defense. And I think that as much as we like to joke about Kobe Bryant's name at the beginning, now people are talking about him with excitement of the position. They've done it a couple of days in a row where that's where they've put him, and he's exceeded well. And so I think this season, especially in the secondary, as anything's going to go this year. It's going to be so fun. But that isn't the joy of the preseason. Remember, for years, I mean, we blew off the preseason games. No one really cared. We kind of half-ass watched and not really pay attention. I'm going to be watching with great interest to see how they put these players out there this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think if the factor you're looking at is what's the optimal possible outcome of the cornerback room, like by the end of the year, like where we feel like we know what those three positions are going to be. If you're looking at it in terms of youth, upside, contract controllability, and price, you want Kobe Bryant.
The younger, the better.
You want Tariq Woolen, and you want Trey Brown. Those are the three guys you're rooting for. And if they can find their way to where it doesn't have to be at the start of the year, but if we're like by the end of the season, like those are the three guys, that alone would be a massive, massive like brick in the new foundation, because you build bricks with foundations with bricks apparently now. But anyway, like it would be a big building block for the team.
Right. Well, we've said this. I keep saying it over and over and over again. 2022 is all about 23. And so it doesn't matter what happens in these first 4 games, 6 games. I know everyone wants to win them. I get that. We don't want to be, the worst team in football. We're not going to be. So I'm not worried about that. But it's that end. It's that second half of that season, how much they can avoid the injury and how quickly these players can develop and catch up to the league. That's going to be what's truly important going into next season.
Yeah, I'm also kind of curious. I haven't followed the contracts as closely, but it would make sense. Like we saw a huge escalation in wide receiver contracts, right? All of a sudden, the top guys are making 30 million a year, or like 28 million a year, 25 million a year. It wouldn't shock me if we see a somewhat of a reciprocal jump in cornerback deals, right? Like all of a sudden, if you now need to pay that much to stop the guy that's making that much, that becomes an even more premium position. It's already a premium position. And if the Seahawks could be in position to have 3 guys on rookie contracts with only one of them, in his second year, huge competitive advantage, like huge. So like, I'm super excited about that. I also am still really excited about Artie Burns and Sidney Jones. Like, I think those guys, Artie Burns, former first round pick, didn't work out in Pittsburgh. Steelers fans hate that guy. They will drag him if you ask anyone about him. He got hurt when he went to the Bears, didn't get a real chance to shine, but his when he did come back and played into size defense, he shined. And the guy, he's got tools as well. Like he's a talented athlete. So I love the makeup of their cornerback room. I remember having this conversation with Evan. Do you guys remember this like earlier in the offseason? He was like, that's the position I'm most worried about. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, that's the position I'm most excited about. Like, I even like Michael Jackson. And I'm not talking about the singer. Like the player like had some outstanding games to end last year. The two final games that he made plays that weren't just like, oh, that was a nice play. They were like, holy shit. Like, where did this guy come from? And he probably won't make the team. Maybe he won't. Maybe he'll make the practice squad. But I'm hoping with the injury situation. So for folks that don't know, Artie Burns has a groin injury. He hasn't been practicing since like yesterday. Sidney Jones has a concussion. These are short-term injuries. Those guys will be back. Probably won't play in the preseason game, I would guess. But hopefully we get more snaps from a guy like Michael Jackson, and that guy has a chance to show off, and maybe we'll see more from him. And I'm really interested. I hope we get to see Kobe Bryant at multiple spots and not just nickel. But yeah, there's so much to learn, and I don't know, guys. Like, it does feel different.
That's been my whole offseason feeling.
You brought up the Albert Breer article, Jeff, and then Albert Breer went on the Mike Salk show and followed up and talked a little bit more about it. I don't know if you had a chance to hear his comments. I'm curious, like, first of all, if you can, like, summarize for people that didn't read or hear his comments, like, what his takeaways were.
So he was at Seahawks camp, I think, last week, and I think the mock game. But really his takeaway, and it's been a lot of the things we've talked about, is really just how special this draft class looks and how it really sets the foundation for the next generation of this team. And frankly, like, if you've listened to our show in the last 5 to 7 years, we've been just hammering the drafting, and rightfully so. Like, this team alone has 6 or 7 rookies. Let's say six rookies that are just genuinely interesting. I remember Brian and I talked about this last year. We were doing a show in the preseason. We were just talking about how just uninteresting their like lack of undrafted free agents, and how like you can legitimately probably count 6 players the last 7 years that have been legitimately interesting rookies. There's 6 on this team alone, and maybe more that we haven't seen yet. I don't know much about Tariq Young or Bo Melton or some of those guys, but that was Breer's main takeaway. Just how you might have 6 guys who are going to impact. I know some people like rolled their eyes. They're talking about how this roster just has not a lot of good players. I thought that was a stupid take. Sorry, Derek. I thought that was stupid. But yeah, the corner was his main point, and really just throughout the roster, they have youth and ascending talent that really just hasn't been there. Like Eskridge, Collier. We've spent so much time beating that drum. So just they feel and they look different, and that was Breer's takeaway. Like, we all know they're going to be short-term struggles. We'll see it this week. Like, no one develops receivers better than the Steelers. So seeing those two corners go up against those receivers will be really interesting. But just, yeah, the corners look really interesting. Kenneth Walker, some of the pass rushers, the tackles, just the team just looks and feels different, obviously with the caveat of the quarterback position. But everywhere else looks different. That was music to my ears because that's been my feel, just looking at the roster.
Yeah, that was right. He also brought up that however you feel about the situation, his interpretation was that there was a cloud lifted on the team, that the Russell Wilson relationship had really soured, and for the last couple of years that had kind of been hanging over the team. And he also mentioned, for folks that didn't hear on the radio, that Pete told him he's got a 5-year plan. So like he didn't get the impression Pete's planning on leaving anytime soon, for people that are hoping that's wrapping up.
Sorry.
But Dayna, I'm going to connect a couple dots, and I want you to tell me if I'm crazy. And I literally just was thinking about this as I was listening to Jeff talk. So I've been every day, pretty much, we're seeing a different former Seahawk show up at camp. We saw Richard Sherman show up. We have heard about how Michael Bennett is going to be part of the broadcast team for preseason. Marshawn Lynch is going to be doing like video content. And yes, we know he got in trouble Vegas does that to folks. But in any event, today, Jermaine Kearse, Doug Baldwin, those guys, I don't remember them coming to camp the last few years. Do you believe there's a connection between Russ moving on and those guys coming back to camp? Either A, that the team is welcoming them back and trying to build those bridges, or B, that they were more willing to be around the team after he's gone?
I think that there's two very possible answers, and they can both be true. One, I think that put yourself here. If Russell Wilson was on this team, would there have been a Seahawks Legends Day where you bring back all of those superstars? And this is not a diss on Russ, because I know I have so much respect for him. But we all know that Russ wants to be the football star. He said it himself. He wants this legacy. He wants this huge thing. Would he be okay with bringing back all of these beloved guys during his training camp? I don't know that that would have happened from a standpoint of them being worried about pissing Russ off already more than he probably had been over the last few years. I don't know that would have happened. The other aspect I think that is probably true and goes hand in hand with that is the front office understands the fan base is wavering right now. They're confused, they're worried. And one way to settle that is to bring back these players who always brought security and love for their team. So maybe they're asking them more, and maybe the players are much more likely to come back. Now, I think there was some big, huge rift between the defense and Russ? None of us will know that. We'll know someday when there's a 30 for 30. We will know eventually, but not anytime soon. But I just have a feeling that Russ was the superstar of this team. And now that they don't have that ego, for lack of a better word, I'm not saying he's egotistical, but I'm saying that ego, that superstar there, they need to bring in others, and they seem very happy to do it. I can't even imagine Doug Baldwin being on that practice field with Russ. I don't know why. I just don't get the gut feeling that those two would have been there together. Certainly not Michael Bennett, and I doubt Russ. Some of the others maybe. I think Jermaine probably would have come back, some of those guys. But I just feel like that was just really for the fans, from those players and from the team, and that they were actually allowed to do that now. I'm trying to be very careful about the way I say it, because I don't want people to think I'm ripping on Russell Wilson. I am not. It's just a shift in dynamic. It's just a shift in how they feel free to do things now.
I think that's fair. I think one of the things that really bummed me out as a fan is that it felt like there was such a falling out with the core stars of that team, like the best, most talented team this franchise will probably ever have. And you look at franchises like, the Steelers or, the Bears, or like, you've got these legendary guys that hang around, and Steelers are a great example of like that. They're culture carriers. They're ambassadors, and they help like class after class after class know what it means to be a Steeler. And that was a foundational group of guys that had not only talent, but mentality that could be like the definition of what it means to be a Seahawk. And like, I would have loved like Matt Hasselbeck back in the days to stick around and be one of those guys, but he lives in, Boston or whatever. But like, Doug lives here. Sherm lives here. To have Jermaine Kearse lives here, I'm pretty sure. I don't know, but like, to have those guys available, Cam, I think you can easily overplay it. Like, I don't think it's the difference between being great and not, but I do believe it sets a tone, and I do believe it elevates I do believe people like Sherman and Doug are guys that can teach the craft and have one conversation that has an impact with a player that changes their course. So I don't know.
And it's comforting. I like
comforting.
it.
I think there's something there. and it's not with everyone. Like I know Nathan made a pretty good point that like Sherman and KJ both wanted to sign with the team last year when Russell was there. But I think bigger picture, I think if you look at Doug, for example, and you look at how he tweets some of the beat reporters, and he just feels way more engaged with the team. If you ever heard him talk, and if you ever listen to Sherman talk about it in the podcast, and this is almost bigger than Russell, I think it's just the formula of what they want the Seahawks to be. And I don't think a lot of those guys, and they might be wrong because of how the NFL is now, and it might just be the mindset of a defensive player or Doug. I think there's a certain way they just think that they wanted to see the Seahawks under Pete be played. And when it got to more Russell-centric, I don't think a lot of those guys believe that can work. And if you listen to Sherman talk on his podcast recently with Patrick Peterson, and he says a lot of the things that sort of Brian was saying last year about Russell and questioning whether he can take that next step and whether he can carry a team. And we'll learn a lot this year. But I think a lot of those guys, if you ask them off the record or to their core, they believe. And I know there was an article from John Boyle talking about how like a lot of the stuff Pete brought to the table with Carson Palmer is how he's bringing the team back, and it's running and defense and character. I think that a lot of those guys felt like the Seahawks had lost their way, and Sherman talked about that. And they're not going to be a good team this year because of how bad their quarterbacks are. But I feel like in those guys' mind, a lot of them, they're back to their core principles. And maybe that comes back to the weight being lifted off their shoulders, because they were kind of in this awkward position of trying to please Russell, trying to please Mark Rodgers, trying to build a team that fit his strength, and that awkward let Russ cook thing. And yeah, there's going to be some ugly years, and it might be a transition until they actually get a quarterback thing. But I just feel like they feel like the core of this whole program is back.
Yeah. That I'm curious. I don't know anything one way or another, but it seems odd for it to be that coincidental. Like it has been person after person after person, and it hasn't been like that in past years. So whatever the reason, I'm glad to see it's happening. I think only good things come from it. So makes me happy as a fan to see some of those guys back around the team. I want to shift gears. We talked about some of the rookies and some of the stories. There is a untold story of this camp, and it's kind of shocking, and I think it's fantastic news. There's been almost no conversation about Charles Cross. Almost none. This is our first pick, number 9 overall. Like a guy that we were over the moon that we got. And Abraham Lucas started to get some starting snaps at right tackles. Doing that, there's a lot of reason to believe this team could end up with 2 rookie bookend tackles. And Lucas has gotten more talk because there's been some change to his, where he was in the rotation. The first thing I heard about Charles Cross was today from Shelby Harris making jokes about how he ripped his shirt, but that Cross is a great pass protector and he's got all the tools. Dayna, my interpretation of that is no news is good news.
Oh, for sure. I did hear a little bit about him it was after just one of the practices, not after the mock game or anything, where it was an article and it was showing, it was on Twitter, and they had video clips. I can't remember. Anyway, I can't remember which beat writer it was, but they talked about how they did this, and Charles Cross, he completely missed his block. Like he just missed it. Went over, talked about it, never missed it again. Like he's extremely teachable from what I've been told, and that he gets it right more times than he doesn't, and he's doing exactly what they wanted from him. Like you said, that's exactly what you want to hear. You don't want to hear, obviously we don't want to hear that they're having to fix him and change him and do all this other stuff, but you also don't want to hear, that he's not melding with the team or something. He's just doing his job, and he's doing it well, to the point where they're not going and talking to Dwayne Brown. They're not going out and trying to get anyone else to replace him. It is his job. I guarantee you that will be his job day one from the beginning. And he's doing exactly what they expected him to. It's refreshing for a first round pick for Seattle.
Yeah. And you want to talk about the other side of the coin on this. And Brian brings up a great point. Do you remember Jermaine Ifedi's rookie camp? Like, how much did we hear about him fighting with Michael Bennett? And there was that story that came out with Sherman later. And just contrast and compare that to, he was a first round pick as well. And yeah, it's sort of like referees. Like if you don't see them for offensive linemen, if you don't see them, if you don't notice them, that's a great sign. we're going to learn a lot more in the coming weeks. Obviously, I don't know if TJ Watt will play this week, but they start the year. They got Bosa coming up right off the bat, so we'll learn a lot quick. And I know these guys are probably going to take their lumps, but yeah, a lot of the people who've come to Seahawks camp nationally just have been buzzing about Cross and just how comfortable he's looked. And another contrast is Ike Ekwonu, who went, I think, 2 picks before. You've heard a lot about him. There's been issues with him just getting through pass protection drills. And you haven't heard that from Neal and the Giants, and you haven't heard that from Cross. So I think your read is right, Brian. I think that's a really good sign. Obviously, when we don't know how good the Seahawks edge guys are, but it'll be really telling to see. I don't know how much you want to play Cross in preseason. Hopefully they keep him under bubble wrap, but seeing him in those live snaps will be really interesting.
Oh, it's funny. I feel very differently about rookies. Like, I want them out there. I want them getting every single snap. So, it's interesting. I hadn't heard about the other, rookie tackles and what's going on with them, but there's 2 possibilities here. One possibility is that Charles Cross is doing really well, and we're going to see when he gets up against other competition that he's going to shine. The other possibility is that the Seahawks pass rush and edge rush is not good. That's always the way these things go. I've been to almost every one of these camps. I haven't been going this year, but I've been so many. And there's been times where it's like, I'm like, oh, the pass protection looks pretty good. And then I'm like, I watch the one-on-one drills and I'm like, these pass rushers are not very good. And they haven't been. We've been like struggling to get good pass rush for years. And so I know nothing about that group. I know, we know Darrell Taylor, but we don't know how it's going to look in this scheme with these guys. We don't know how, the top free agent's going to look opposite Taylor. That's a big question mark, Mafe. Maybe those guys are all going to be great. And if they're great, if the pass rush looks good on Saturday night, that's a really good sign for Charles Cross. All by itself, however Charles Cross plays in the game. So yeah, I'm really, the silence was deafening on Cross, I think, relative to the how many number 9 overall picks for the Seahawks have gotten this little coverage this far into camp. Abraham Lucas, real quick, for folks that haven't been following, he started in the mock game, started for a while. He's now back on the second team, and Jake Curhan is back at first string. So I think they're still figuring out what they're going to do there. I think just taking a quick poll with you all, you're all hoping that Lucas wins that role, I assume?
Yeah.
Dayna, I assume you are too?
I would. Mm-hmm.
Only reason, I give some pause there is, so when Shelby Harris was talking about Charles Cross, he's like, good pass protector, has the length, good strong hands, all that stuff, which was great. But he's like, but coming out of that system, he's probably gonna have some work to do on the run game. And Lucas is the same situation. And so knowing how much this team's gonna have to run the ball well, Curran, he was part of what was working last year.
That was gonna be my point.
Running the ball. He's kind of sloppy and had some stuff, but he and Disley working together was pretty powerful. So I'm kind of curious there. I could go either way, but I think it would be great if Lucas could start.
It's interesting because they're almost exact opposites. That Lucas has this big, strong athlete that can move, and he's got the athletic profile. Curran I know Curran got crushed by PFF grades last year, but everyone talks about Curran like he's sort of like jobber, but the whole Rashad Penny thing, he was the right tackle for all those games that Rashad Penny broke out for. So I know Curran's a limited, Lucas is this big, nice athlete. Curran's the opposite. He's not, he's a try hard grinder. So it's not the end of the world if Curran's a second-year player. He's an undrafted. He's probably closer to Breno in terms of athletic ability than some of the Sean Locklear, who's probably a better comparison for Abe Lucas. I
think Lucas and Sean Locklear he reminds me a lot of.
Yeah, so very different athletes, very different players. But again, you got 2 first and second year tackles probably going to be, it's one of those guys going to be the right tackle. So to me, that again, it fits in the whole roster where that's what you want. You want these guys. And obviously Lucas has a much higher ceiling than Curran, but if Curran wins that job and starts out and you can run the ball a little bit, that to me is not a bad, I think it's a win-win here.
Dayna.
Yeah.
Dayna.
Yeah.
It's not only about the tackles. There is competition
Do it.
at the guard spots.
Okay, so wait, hold on. I want to tell you, in the middle of the Patreon questions, I'm assuming this is where you're going with this. B. Armbruster said, no question this week. I just want to hear Brian spend 10 or 15 minutes feeling vindicated about Phil Haynes.
Phil Haynes, baby. I mean, yeah, I people don't know how much shit I take from the Hawk Talk crew about Phil Haynes. Like, and this has been going on for years, since his rookie season. And it's not like craziness, but like when you have Dwayne Brown talking up a player in OTAs as a rookie in his first few snaps and saying like, this guy's got something. There are not a lot of situations where quality vet offensive linemen talk about a young offensive lineman in that way, where they don't turn out to be good players. Like it happens, but it's not like KJ Wright talking about a defensive back. Like that's a very different situation. And like, then in addition to that, you've got him playing well when he's gotten the chance to start. He's had some injury issues, but he wasn't injured last year. They just didn't play him until the very end of the season. And guess what? He graded out as their best guard by a significant margin when he played. So Pete Carroll said this week they've got 3 starting guards. Phil Haynes is pushing Gabe Jackson at the right guard position. Unfortunately, this is Phil Haynes like last year of his deal or whatever it is. So it's not like we've got him for a bunch of rookie years, but he is young and I think more talented. So Dayna, I'm curious, like, let's say Phil Haynes earns a starting role. What do you do with Gabe Jackson? You keep him, you trade him, you cut him?
Or you keep him. And the reason why I say that is because this team has a tendency to go through these positions like water, especially if you have a bunch of younger kids who maybe are still learning to block. I think you keep everyone available at all times, just in case something happens. But I think the quote from Carroll was really interesting about what you said. That he was pushing Gabe Jackson at right guard. He said that Haynes could be capable of start at either guard spot. And isn't that the important thing? Is that, you have that versatility there. You have that importance. But I just think, and this could be me just being a nervous Nelly, Gabe Jackson stays because you never know what's going to happen at those positions. Because you don't want to, get rid of him. And yeah, it would be handy. Maybe you'd get, an extra single draft pick somewhere, whatever it may be, low level draft pick. But you have to have that depth. And plus with Phil Haynes, with his being his last year in his contract, this is not going to be an expensive player. So making sure that he's developed well and into your system, I think that just does nothing for good. It's much like the rookies for the next couple of years. So I think hold on for dear life.
I don't know. I get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I'm so all in on the youth movement that for me, if you can get like a 5th round pick for Gabe Jackson, and it means that your backup at guard is someone like Jake Curran, I might be okay with that. I don't love the idea of the team in its situation, like in its evolution, having a vet sitting on the bench. I'd rather fill that with another potential prospect that may or may not work out. And if all goes to shit, Dayna, guess what? They lose.
It's already fit.
And we get a higher draft pick next year.
Yeah, so that's fair. That's fair.
Yes.
What do you guys think? Now, let me ask you too this, because this is interesting to me. One of the things that I loved about the Super Bowl teams, especially those couple of years, was the fact that they had constant rotational players, that they could move those players in and out of spots left and right, and that it never we seem to have less injuries. I could really be wrong like that if I went back and looked. It's been a minute since that happened. But there just seemed to be this constant rotation. And so players weren't tiring out as much. Do you think that it seems in some of these positions that they're getting this depth? Is that possibly something that's on their mind? Because they've done it before.
What do you think, Jeff?
I think that's a bigger issue down the road when they're closer to probably the roster that John always talks about, the championship caliber roster. I think like what they used to have at corner is unprecedented. I don't know if they'll ever be able to build that again where like Sherman and Browner went out, and then Lane and Maxwell just emerged off the bench. Russell Okung went out for like 10 weeks and like they were completely unstopped at all. Like, down the road. And this team, like, they got 2 first-rounders, 2 second-rounders coming next year. Like, there's a lot more coming down the road. They got cap room. That's something that you can look at. But I think eventually they'll have to get to that point. Right now, I think they're just trying to figure out who are foundational players right now. Who can we move forward with? And that's why, Dayna, I love the way you've talked about 2022 is about 2023. I think that's really the most practical way to look at the season because, you can cheer for draft picks or cheer for tanking. I don't think the team is designed to tank. I think they're going to be competitive. They're going to be limited at quarterback, so they're not going to be a 10-win team, but I don't think they're going to be a 2-win team. But really, I think they're at the point where they're just trying to figure out, okay, are we ascending at the end of the year? And I hate to use old Seahawks seasons as an example, but there are a lot of comparables to that 2011 season where there's a lot of revisionist history with that year where everyone remembers it for like, oh, another year Pete couldn't win without Russell or the LOB couldn't win without a quarterback. I remember that year very, very differently. And Brian, when me talk about this a lot, there was a Marshawn Lynch game. I think it was in Dallas.
Cowboys.
He figured out the scheme, or him and Tom Cable got on the same page. And the team was just so different after that. And Richard Sherman came off the bench that year. And those are the 2 things I remember about that year. That's not the LOB. Richard Sherman missed like 8 games that year. Didn't start for like week 8. And they didn't have Bobby yet. So there's a lot of revisionist history. I think this year is a lot like that in terms of like they sucked at the beginning. They had a game in Pittsburgh that year where they just looked abysmal. And they might have games like that this year. But just going back to what you're saying, I think that's the direction. You want to hope that by the end of the year, they look like they've turned a corner with their talent level.
Yeah, that was the year that it was Brandon Brown's first year. He will still always be one of my favorite Seahawks. I love watching that guy play. He's so physical. And against Pittsburgh, he had a rough game. And I had been
he was terrible.
Super high on him. And like people were all up in my mentions, like, this guy's terrible. He's awful. I'm like, he's going to be a Pro Bowler. And they're like, you're crazy. And he was a Pro Bowler by the end of the year. And I remember after that Dallas game, the Seahawks played against the Ravens, Ray Lewis's Ravens.
Yeah.
And they were good.
Yeah, they made the Super Bowl.
Good. And Marshawn Lynch broke Ray Lewis's ankles, like not literally, but you know what I mean. And it was one of the best like dead legs you've seen from a running back. And like that team found itself in they finished like 6-2, I want to say, something like that. And they were running it without a quarterback. T-Jack had a torn pec. Like that was just that team became like, they went from being bad to being tough.
Yeah, that was exactly.
Run the ball, they could defend, and then all they needed was a pass rush, and a quarterback. And it took them 2 years to get the pass rush. It took them 1 year to get the quarterback. And that was that. But that was the foundational year. So like, in some ways this feels like it could be a 2010, depending on how things go. But I think it's more like 2011 because I don't think we're going to see a lot of vets playing this year like we saw in 2010 for the Seahawks that then were turned over, in 2011. So, let's take some patron questions because I can keep going. We will keep going. But Dayna, hit us with some patron questions. Let's make sure we cover those. While she's picking those up, folks, if you haven't already, please give the show a like. It takes just 2 seconds. Give the show a like. Subscribe to the channel. We're continuing to grow the community. It's a fun group. And most importantly, go over to patreon.com/hawkblogger and get immediate access to our Slack channel and the community there, which is awesome. A bunch of really good people, and all the proceeds go to charity. So really, really no reason not to be part of a great Seahawks community. Be part of the building aspect of this team. don't be the people that everyone's like, hey, you're a bandwagoner. You're only here when the team's good. The fun part is to be there now, and to see it all happen, and to find people together along the way to watch it and enjoy it with. So hopefully you do that. Patreon.com/hawkblogger. And one of the benefits is you get to ask us questions that we try to answer every week. Dayna, what are our questions this week?
All right, we're going to start with Eric's question, and I'm actually going to give this one to Jeff. Aside from wins and losses, what are your top 3 successes you'd like to see out of this season?
Okay, so the biggest thing to me is the offensive line. We've gone so many years with them just not having a sustainable plan, sustainable solutions. Every year's been almost a clusterfuck. So number one to me is setting up how many long-term pieces do you have on this offensive line? That's for sure number one. Number two is core players on defense. We talk about their defense. They've been they had that great group, and then they've been kind of patching it together with Bobby and KJ and the rest of the guys, but they don't really have those. They haven't really had those core players. So watching who emerges, whether that's corner, like how good is Jordan Brooks? They have a lot of solid edge guys, but we don't know if there's a blue chip kind of star, like can Darrell Taylor step forward? So figuring out who are our core players on defense, number two for me. And then the rest, probably the next one, I don't really care about the quarterbacks, to be honest. Not that. I guess it's just the rookie class in general. Like, can Kenneth Walker play? Can Boya Mafe play? I talked about the corners, but really it's just number three is just how many of these rookies can be long-term pieces. And because you look across the roster, there's some stop gaps, but offensive line, edge, corner, to me, those are the three.
Good. A good answer, Jeff. Nice job. All right, Brian, who do you predict will be the biggest impact rookie after what you've seen from training camp? Okay, let's say outside of Tariq, because we've already talked about him quite a bit. Assuming that was your answer. I shouldn't have assumed that. I'm sorry. But... You're muted.
Sorry, I was trying to be nice and mute and not make noises. I'm going to go with Kobe Bryant. I actually... From what I've watched of him and the way he moves, I think he's going to demand time. And I think he's going to this is a guy that made plays on the ball regularly during college, won the Thorpe Award his senior year, best DB in the nation. We were kind of sold a bill of goods with Tedrick Thompson having like a bunch of interceptions at Colorado, and then he was could make plays on the ball and he had good instincts. He just wasn't an athlete. I think Kobe Bryant has already proven he's got the athletic skills to go along with it. And this is a huge stretch, but I'm going to say it, that the body type and the style that he reminds me of is Marlon Humphrey. Is one of my favorite corners in the game. And if he could have half the impact of Marlon Humphrey, that would be a lot of fun.
Jeff, who's yours real quick?
I'm still more in the Brian camp on this draft pick, but I think it's going to be Kenneth Walker. I think he has superstar potential at running back, and it sounds like his just like explosion. And if he can become more of a pass catcher, and we know Penny's durability things, if he can become that like Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook kind of running back, it's not my biggest priority in building a team. I'm closer to Brian on that draft pick, but I think him as a player, I just think he has upside that I don't know if any other player other than Cross has at their position.
Yeah, I think I'd pick a Walker across too. All right. This to go along with the rookies from Braxton. That question, I'm sorry, was from Troy Fagan. Sorry, Troy, I forgot to give you credit for that. This one's from Braxton. What would a successful rookie season for Boye Mafe look like to you? Either one of you.
A successful rookie season for Mafe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mafe, sorry.
Honestly, anything over 3 sacks would be acceptable as a rookie. I think people have unrealistic expectations of rookie pass rushers, but if he can be a guy that is part of the rotation, like a regular rotational guy, and not like an Alton Robinson where he was there and then never getting snaps for whatever reason, plus he shows some production with actually getting the quarterback, that would be what I would look for. I don't know. Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, I think that just being a complimentary pass rusher that looks capable. Um, he's not going to be the full every down player. It doesn't sound like. I think they're going to ease him along. Pete's done a good job with that historically of kind of bring people along slowly. In some cases, in other cases, he's been that. But we'll talk about that another day. But yeah, I think it's really just showing that he can be a capable pass rusher on third down. I don't know about what sacks. I don't know if he's going to do much on early downs, but if he can just add pass rush ability, we're a team. This is definitely the biggest question mark to me is the edge rush group. If he can show that he can be part of that group moving forward, to me, that's huge.
Cool. Cameron asked, chances of Penny getting Offensive Player of the Year MVP. I know we talked about this a little bit last time, but after a little bit of camp, has your opinions changed?
I've got to see the offensive line playing together before I can say that. Like, I don't think I think people underestimate the impact of the tackles on the running game.
Yeah,
Dwayne Brown was a fantastic run blocker, even with like a bum knee. I think I don't know what we have in Austin Blythe. I think I know, and I don't think he's going to move people. So, a running back can be good behind a mediocre offensive line in the run game, but I don't think running back can be great. So, TBD.
yeah, I think like 0%. He's MVP. The quarterbacks are just so dominant now. Offensive Player of the Year, you have to do what he did last year, essentially, and basically they'd have to like bring Adrian Peterson back to like motivate him. I don't know, but I can't see him repeating what happened at the end of last year. I think he'll be a productive player if he stays in the field, but I think there's going to be a big learning curve, as Brian said. And I think without Russell there, it's a little easier to stack the box and prepare for that run game. So I've very little chance of that. I think you're just hoping that he can be a core part of this team moving forward because he's on a 1-year deal again.
Mm-hmm. All right. So Trey Howell has a question for Jeff. Oh wait, no, it's his question from Imani Waddle. Sorry. Question for Jeff. Thoughts on Seattle trading for Roquan Smith with Chicago's ongoing contract dispute? Would Denver's second be worth it or enough to even get it done?
I would not want them to do it. I'll start with the caveat. I think Roquan Smith is a great player. And I think that Seattle can use another linebacker. I think they're really thin in inside linebacker. And if Brooks is hurt a bit right now, and if you got Cody Barton, someone else needs to start, it's not great. But again, I just don't think that's where you'd want to invest the kind of capital, the kind of money you'd have to pay him. He wants to be the highest paid linebacker in the league, and they got to pay Jordan Brooks the next couple of years. So we've seen what happens when they pay unconventional positions with Jamal Adams. It sort of seems like that again. And Roquan, again, great player. I just think if you're going to give up the draft picks, where I think are going to be a core part of building this next generation of this team, they can't make the same mistake they made with Jamal Adams at a non-premier position. I think that would be a luxury move, something that would be done in a video game, not in reality.
Yeah, good answer. Now, Jen Mazzarello, I hope I said that right, Jen. She asked a question outside of the Patreon question, so I don't know if it was supposed to be included in the questions, but it's a good question. So I want you both to answer this. So I'm going to give Jen full credit for this because it's really good. Who will be a better asset from the Broncos trade? Noah Fant or Shelby Harris? Brian.
Well, I think over time it's going to be Fant.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to say with the quarterback situation. Like, it'll be a near term. So I don't know. I'll go with Fant. Over the course of time.
Yeah, Fant's ceiling. They have him for 2 more years for sure with that 5th-year option, but he's at kind of a quiet camp. It's a little concerning. I don't know if that's the quarterback position. They talked about how they're going to throw up the middle more and there's going to be more tight ends. You haven't heard a ton about Noah Fant. So I don't know if that's a quarterback thing. I don't know if that's Shane Waldron not being able to use tight ends well, but I want to see a little more, hear a little more from him. I think Shelby Harris is sneaky value on this team. I think they don't have a lot of interior guys or defensive linemen in this new defense who can generate pass rush. They've put in Jefferson. So I think Shelby Harris is going to be a sneaky good player for them. I think they prioritized him schematically for a reason. So I'll go with him, but I'm hoping I'm wrong. I'm hoping Fant. I think getting him is like getting a first round pick because he's a really high upside player that just haven't had the quarterbacks to maximize him. So he's still in that situation, unfortunately, and I hope it's him.
All right, that's about it.
Thank you, Dayna, and thanks, patrons, for the questions. Those were good this week. We had some good ones. For folks that don't know, in the past, like few preseasons, some of us have joined the game live, covered the game live. We don't actually show the game on YouTube because our stream would get stopped immediately. But we do add some commentary. At least I do. I don't know if Jeff will do that with me this year or not, but if nothing else, I'll be there Saturday. I'm curious, Dayna, what are you most interested to see? Are you going to watch the game Saturday?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
What are you going to be watching? What are the top priorities for your focus during what can be obviously usually pretty crappy football?
I like I said a little bit ago, I'm just so excited about these preseason games. And I think it's just because everything is fresh and new. And so I'm really excited. I really am going to watch all the rookies. My whole focus, I have, I usually keep a little notebook so I can write my articles and I have little things, but my focus is on the rookies, how they're using them, where they're using them, and how they respond to another team. I think that when you're going against your own offense or defense, sometimes that doesn't give you obviously a true sense of who the player is or how aggressive they're going to be or any of that. And I'm excited to see that from them. I'm excited to see how they play against a scheme they don't know or haven't been taught or watched, play from the sidelines as during practice. So I want to see how they respond to what is truly, it's not their true welcome to the NFL moment because that doesn't happen until week 1, but it's still their first NFL feeling. And I kind of want to see how they react to that.
Jeff, what's your ideal post-game story for the Seahawks' first preseason game? How does it read? Who are the stars?
The offensive line looks good in pass protection, and they're able to run the ball against Pittsburgh. But to me, so much of my interest on the offense comes down to how the offensive line looks. I'm far more interested almost in the run game this year to see how those new guys do versus it's going to be a struggle in the pass game. So again, a lot of the focus in the coverage is going to be the quarterback competition. I just don't really care that much. To me, they're both placeholders. I kind of I'm hoping that they show something to make the season a little more watchable, but I said this to Brian the other day. It reminds me so much, again, 2011. I see so many comparisons between T-Jack and Geno, and then Whitehurst, who's more of the toolsy guy, who was raw, and Locke. I see so many comparables there. You can probably nitpick that, but it's so much like that season. So I don't really care about that. To me, you want to see that the cornerbacks can play against those. I said Pittsburgh had very good receivers historically. And you want to see the offensive line, those two guys or some of the young guys, they don't look like a disaster. And we've seen so many preseason games in the past where they've just looked disastrous on the offensive line. And it's like, how the hell are they going to get through a season like this? So, but I want to warn everyone about this, just heads up. Last year, me and Brian came into the offseason. They had a new offensive coordinator. We were so excited to see how this looks. And they were super vanilla and almost to the point where they only had 3 draft picks last year. And some of them one of them Stone Forsythe. So it was like, I remember me and Brian's kid, were just so angry watching that first game. It was so dull. And what happened was the preseason went from 4 games to 3 games. So teams got super, super conservative. The Seahawks roster actually, Seahawks and Pittsburgh are like the only teams going through quarterback competition. So it could be an interesting game, but teams got even more vanilla. It used to be like they would build up slowly, and now it's just like very different. So I'm very curious if the Seahawks, with all these young players, play this a little differently, because the rest of the league last year, Seahawks included, almost sat all of their interesting players throughout the whole preseason last year. And we were watching guys who are going to end up in the CFL. So I hope it's a little more interesting, because the Seahawks do. Dayna mentioned it. There's so many interesting players. I hope it's not just watching 4th string players, but the quarterback competition might help in that regard.
Yeah, I think those are good reminders. I think it's also good reminders. People freak out about how quarterbacks play in these games, and specifically backup quarterbacks, and forget that by like the second or third quarter, you are putting people in the game that will never play in the NFL.
Yeah.
And so they're playing, like all of a sudden the backup or the third string quarterback, like Jacob Eason, looks great. Oh my God, he's got to be in the mix. It's like, well, he's playing guys that will not even be in the practice squad. So like, chill. I mean, it's good. Hopefully they do look good, but I don't think there's a lot that can be made from, you know, how the backup plays versus how the starter plays. I am interested. Like, my expectation is they are not going to treat the quarterback position the way they've treated it in the past. They don't need to protect Geno Smith or Drew Lock. Like, in fact, those guys need reps. So I'm hoping we don't see like the 2 series from Geno Smith and then Drew Lock comes in. Like, I feel like almost they should both get a half. Like, I want to. They should be getting reps. The team needs them to get reps. They need the reps. And if they get injured, you know, sucks. I hope that doesn't happen, but it's not like the Super Bowl is on the line here. So will be interesting to see some differences there. I do think Rashad Penny should get kids gloves. I don't think he needs to prove anything in the preseason. I think Kenneth Walker and the rest of the running backs should get more time. And as far as storylines go, I'm already pretty confident what we have at the corner position. I would like to see like more of it because I'd enjoy it. I'd love to see turnovers there, would be great. But the biggest thing that will change my opinion one way or another about this team based on that game will be the pass rush. That is the number one thing. I do think like watching the offensive line play will be big, but I think there's a lot of signals about why that will work out. If not right away, eventually I think those guys will find their footing. The pass rush, don't know. I don't know.
And that, Jeff, you brought up a really interesting point that I had kind of forgotten, is that this is a very important game for Pittsburgh too, because of their quarterback situation. You know, we have to remember it's Geno and Drew, but then they have Trubisky and, you know, they have their new guys. And right now the coach is saying, well, Mitch is winning that. Well, we keep hearing Geno's winning that, but we have seen preseason completely change those situations. Russell Wilson is the perfect example of that. And so while this game is important to Seattle for certain reasons, it's also going to be really important. So to see how those quarterbacks are going to be playing for the starting position. So that is a great place for the Seahawks defense to really try and shine and prove what they can do. That's going to add a really fun dimension to this game. That was a really good point.
Do you guys have a couple more minutes?
Sure.
Because I need to rant about something and I want to hear your perspectives.
Get a drink.
So there's this crazy like Twitter theory going out there that Drew Lock just needed a new situation and he can beat Ryan Tannehill. Have you heard this? Well, so I've been very outspoken in the fact that I have no interest in Drew Lock. And people are like, hey, you're cutting him short too early. And maybe, I don't think I am, but we'll find out. But the debate that kind of came up and what I made a point about is that, one, I don't think there's a lot of examples of quarterbacks being bad for 3 years and then being good, really good. I don't think there's a lot of examples of that. So that's one thing. And two, I think part of what helps in those situations is going to a place that can develop a quarterback, or that you have history of developing quarterbacks. And I've made the point that I don't think Pete has developed quarterbacks in his time here. And people are like, what are you talking about? Look at Russell. Russell was fantastic. Look what he did. There's a big difference between putting quarterbacks in a position to succeed based off their skill set and developing a quarterback. Those are two different things. And it drives me nuts that people don't get it. And I have to I almost wrote an article about it. So they almost got me angry enough to write an article, but I didn't do it. And I compare and contrast like a Matt Hasselbeck to a Russell Wilson. Matt Hasselbeck, if you remember, he came to Seattle on the trade from Green Bay and was like a disaster when he started. Like throwing interceptions, doing twirly birds in the backfield, like inaccurate with his throws. Like it was like, why in the world is this guy even? Why did they trade for him? He was like Charlie Whitehurst level bad. Like he was really bad. Lost his starting job. Trent Dilfer took it over. Came back and became a Pro Bowl quarterback. Became a Super Bowl quarterback. And he had distinctly different skills than he had when he started. Mike Holmgren has developed quarterbacks everywhere he's gone. He's given them skills that they didn't have before. My point is, I don't think that I can find a single meaningful, discernible skill that that Russell Wilson left with that he didn't have with him when he came. The only thing that really comes to mind is that when Brian Schottenheimer came to town, he did help Russell get rid of some of the twirl back, when he'd run into sacks and like blindly spin around. Otherwise, like Pete gave Russ Carl Tater Smith for like a bunch of years and not much else. So like, I really don't think that I have a lot of reason to believe that Pete Carroll or anyone on the Seahawks have shown that they can develop a quarterback. So that's my rant. I want to know, like, tell me why I'm crazy. What, Dayna? I saw a bunch of fun reactions. I mean, what's your thought on all that?
I don't think you're wrong. I don't think that Pete Carroll is a quarterback whisperer. I do think he knows how to put people on his roster or on his coaching staff, that can help in that, and they were very lucky to have such a talented quarterback drop to them. Yes. But my only counterpoint to this is, number one, and people keep in mind, I live in an area where Drew Lock was considered a god here, and they were heartbroken when he ended up going to Denver. I live in Kansas City, and he was in Missouri. I'm telling you, I have heard more about Drew Lock in the last few weeks than I ever wanted to. But my only counterpoint to what you said, Brian, is this. There is one team who's probably even worse at developing quarterbacks, and that is the Denver Broncos. They cannot develop a quarterback to save their life. They have to go get veterans at the tail end of their career or toward the end of their career to bring home championships. Now, are they really good at that? Yes, and kudos to them. Won them a Super Bowl, right? I'm not saying that's bad, but what I'm saying is they have no clue how to deal with rookie quarterbacks either. So bringing Drew here, will he get better? I think he might get better. Will he ever be great? I doubt it. But I do think there is an opportunity for him to improve. To what level, I don't know. But I do think, like I said, Denver's terrible at developing quarterbacks. He will probably get somewhat better here.
I agree with that. Jeff, I mean, do you see a path here to where, what percentage odds would you give that Drew Lock follows the Ryan Tannehill narrative and arc?
Me, I'm at like 8%, maybe even like 5%. And I just don't see it as a realistic. It would be based on what I saw, and I watched them Denver the last couple of years, and I've watched them play. It would be just like a drastic, like stunning turnaround, and I'd be stunned. I just would be absolutely stunned. Tannehill is probably the best example, but outside of that, like who else can you really think of? There's not many guys who've gone just from that bad to capable. And even the guys who have, like Ryan Fitzpatrick is probably another example. He was a backup level player, became like a fringe limited starter, but I don't know if I see that either. I'm sort of like, John Boyle wrote a cool article on like talking to Carson Palmer and talking about the things that Pete does for a quarterback in terms of just like building up confidence, making them feel comfortable in their shoes. All the cool things he did Palmer said without Pete, he would have never made it. And he had no confidence in himself. So they're trying to use that to like on the team's website to fire them. They probably fire up the fans about Drew Lock, but Carson Palmer was like a Heisman Trophy #1 recruit in the country kind of guy. Like there's a little bit of a difference. And Brian's right. Like Mike Holmgren, you remember him and Andy Reid are probably like the two best. And Holmgren's the one who essentially hired Andy Reid in Green Bay and kind of brought him into the NFL. Like Holmgren like worked with Steve Young and Joe Montana and Brett Favre, and then the stuff he did with Hasselbeck in that West Coast system when he was just like not ready to play in the NFL was incredible. Like how good he was at timing routes and how much he developed him. What Pete can do is make a guy more confident, make the guy more comfortable in his shoes. But does Locke have the actual talent to be an NFL player and a functional one? I think he's a fringe guy at best. So I think Pete is good at what he does. I always thought Pete and Holmgren would be the perfect complements as on the same staff, but like what Holmgren and Andy Reid can do at the quarterback versus what Pete can do at the quarterback, it's just worlds apart.
Yeah, that's the part I don't feel like people seem to recognize. Enough people do. And I've seen people in the chat. I've heard this on Twitter too. Like the other name they give out is Drew Brees, as that's an example. Like Drew Brees had 105 passer rating in San Diego 2 seasons before he was gone. He threw 24 touchdowns, 27 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. He threw over 3,000 yards 3 times. Like, what are we talking about? Like, Drew Lock hasn't had a season where he's thrown over 6.5 yards. Like, if you look at his games, like he doesn't throw the ball downfield that well. He turns the ball over at a high frequency. Like, I don't want the guy to fail. That's different. I have no interest in watching the guy play because I just don't see, from what I've seen, I don't believe he's got meaningful upside. If he does play and he plays well, great. But like comparing him and his first few seasons to Drew Brees, that is crazy talk. Like it's just does not make any sense at all. So anyway, I had to rant about it because it saves me some time from writing up a big thread on Twitter that I was going to write. So I appreciate you both sticking with me for a little bit longer. But outside of the quarterbacks, this is a pretty bullish conversation we've had here about this team. And we haven't even talked about the receivers. We haven't talked about, Bo Melton making an impact. We haven't talked about some of the other names here that I think could be big. And so really, really excited about Saturday. I'm really ready to watch this team play, unwrap some presents, see what we get, and hope we see you all there. So thank you, Dayna. Thank you, Jeff. And thanks to all you tuned in. Please go ahead and click subscribe. Give the show a like. We'd really appreciate it. And head on over to patreon.com/hawkblogger. Join up. Now is the time. And we will see you all very soon. Go Hawks.